Hi everyone, nice to be here with you this afternoon. I'm James, I'm based here in San Francisco. I have spent time living in 5 different countries, but I am American. Pardon if I have a slight accent. I speak German quite often. I have been the immediate former tech and energy envoy for the state of Bavaria here in the US. Some of you who might know Europe knows what that means. I can explain it in a bit. And in my current role as advisor for one of the largest accelerator programs here in the country, as well as for an AI institute, I have worked with a lot of startups, with founders, helping them to unlock the value of their startups and explain capital, gaining the trust of new investors, and also understanding how to pitch to corporates. And so a bit about me. I have studied in the US as well as in Germany. In Munich at the Technical University after Princeton. My background was in law and chemical engineering, and then graduate studies in energy and finance, and worked in Siemens and also in startups in mobility and infrastructure, also in infrastructure engineering consulting. I moved back to the US. I am born American, so it's a bit weird, but I'm very internationally minded. And so in the last 8.5 years have mentored many different accelerator programs, from German Accelerator to Extreme Tech Challenge, which has hundreds of millions of dollars for startups that are more in the hard tech space and the AI space, to the Manos Accelerator, which actually helps Latino entrepreneurs. So I've worked really quite broadly, and also as the alumni advisor for the 4-time winning SpaceX Hyperloop competition team, I've had the chance to meet certain people, including Elon Musk, who has a certain reputation now with the 4-time winning team from the Tech University of Munich, to, in the last year, meeting twice with the governor of California in my role as foreign representative of Germany's largest and wealthiest state, Bavaria, to speak about things like improving the manufacturing base of California through automation, which is coming from companies like KUKA from Bavaria. Some of the companies that I've worked with over the years, from those big Bavarian names like BMW and Audi, Infineon, Adidas, Puma, on things like corporate innovation, Munich Re Ventures. I have also then worked with US companies like Nvidia and Apple on their European strategy, because the largest footprints in EMEA for those two specifically, as many other big tech companies, is in the state of Bavaria. And in general, my approach to helping young founders or inspiring young founders and supporting them is to always explain, as long as you've spotted a gap in the market where there's a need and you have confirmation from potential purchasers or buyers, and you understand how to do product development in a fast way, or I guess not in necessarily a fast way, but in a way that you don't sacrifice accuracy for speed, and neither speed for accuracy, you will likely reach success. If there's anything I can say right now, and apologies, I had planned for this sort of impulse speech to be made by some friends I'd invited on short notice, including the founder of Shazam, and then I invited the other co-founder of Impossible Foods. And because it's Saturday, people just have a difficulty. And then last minute, I invited my friend who works on spinning off actually nuclear fusion startups from Lawrence Livermore. He's also in Tiburon. So you guys got me instead of some even more impressive people that I know. But that's also just to say, like, I've worked with some of the brightest and the best. And I think if you want to be one of the brightest and the best in the future, always believe in what you're doing. I don't want to seem too surface level. If there are any particular questions about the types of technologies that I might think are coming up in future, I think you are welcome to ask. I have some particular thoughts on beneficial, explainable, and responsible AI and where it's going. One of the companies that I most recently supported on their European expansion was OpenAI, so their main engineering headquarters will now be in Munich, in concert with the Paris headquarters. I attended their executive summit as the representative of the Bavarian government back in November. So they had a Paris summit, a Munich summit, and then a Singapore summit. So that just tells you how important the region that I was representing here in Silicon Valley is in the global context of technology. And other companies that I've expanded include Cloudflare, Slack, Joby Aviation, Lucid Motors. So many different types of companies across mobility, AI, cybersecurity, robotics, semiconductors, supply chain. So if any of those sorts of industries sound interesting, you're also welcome to reach out and stay in touch. Anyone have one question about starting up in the US? What some challenges might be for startups that I've seen? Yes?
How do you compare the ecosystem in Bavaria and in Munich? There's like...
To here?
Yeah.
I think in preparing the more growth stage companies I've worked with, especially those that are only less than 100 heads, right? Most of the companies from the US I've helped go there, or the other way around, are over 100 in terms of headcount, but for those that are under 100 in headcount, they're quite small, so they're quite agile. I think you have more flexibility in the US overall because innovation outpaces policy, whereas in the EU, you have policy that always tries to stay ahead or in lockstep with innovation, or creates these structures that aren't exactly easy to get around. So I think building in the US can be easier if you focus on the right markets, meaning the right states, because we have 50 different states and 50 different markets. Really only half of them are, competitive locations that you would consider as a startup, right? Like I would think that half you would say you're not going to go and start up in Alaska or Montana. Not that they are not optimal, but for most startups in an enterprise or consumer-oriented space. So what I've seen is that founders usually find the playbook pretty straightforward. Delaware corporation, make sure that even if the DNA of your company is not American, to adopt kind of that mindset, as I was speaking with another gentleman earlier about, where you're prone to try new things and not just this person is a data engineer, they have to do data engineering. This person's a designer, they're a designer. You have to enable people to try new things. Also, people management is different, right? Because people can try new things, the way you develop your employees is different. And you want to be a good people manager if you're building a company, because you can't scale if you don't manage the people and create a culture that people actually, that's one of the reasons why the co-founder of Impossible Foods couldn't come, because he's giving a talk right now on culture and how important it is in building companies that he advises. So that's a little bit of my feedback. You have a follow-up? Sure.
But do you think that culture could be implemented in Europe, taking in consideration that the way that Europe sees work-life balance, working hours, and even role in the job, mental health, all of this issue?
This is actually one of the most difficult parts of my work now and in the last decade. I get very frustrated, and it has created a lot of tension because in Europe, people just approach work differently. And when I say people, I guess I'm speaking more of those that are in mid-size, so SMEs to big corporates. The way that they approach work-life balance can be frustrating for even those in corporate America, because the rhythm of work, the pace, as well as the time devoted to it is drastically different. I think people are willing to accept the Ferragosto, the August off, that the Italians do or even the French do. But it kind of extends to, just 3-week holidays, long weekends, people don't check emails, things move. I'll give you a little anecdote. I had the 5th largest heavy duty EV battery for trucks and buses company, right? The largest ones are Chinese due to volume, but the 5th largest is based here. It's a really big name, Proterra, I'll tell you the name. They were looking to expand because they had big contracts with Volvo trucks, and they sent a small delegation of leaders over. This was unfortunately in August. No one was answering emails. I had to wake up at 6 a.m. to help guide them, and they were looking for a retooling place where they could find a place and fix the batteries on where they'd launch pilot projects or where they had customers, right? So where the customer could send the battery to be fixed or whatever. They wanted to provide that sort of, after-sales service in the European market, and Bavaria was a very strategic location to meet their Northern European customer needs, their Eastern European customer needs, and their Western European customer needs. At the end of the day, I was the one waking up at 6 a.m. calling the locations where they were going to go, which were mobility centers. They were looking for roughly 40 meters by 40 meters, right, of industrial space. No one was taking these calls because they were on 3-week holidays, and that's just one example. At the end of the day, I think implementing the American culture into Europe just won't work, and Americans either have to get used to that or they have to just learn to make compromises. Ultimately, I think the best way it works is if a European adopts the American way to some extent and just adapts in certain ways that make it that lowers the friction. That is one of the sticking points, though, for a lot. I have another founder of an AI company that I also expanded, and they're roughly 80 heads right now, and they're hiring in Munich actively, as well as in San Francisco and in New York. And what they do is they help chemicals companies like BASF, even food companies, right, that are working on chemical formulations, and they want to be able to track, using AI, track the different formulations and the iterations that they're going through. Chemicals companies, food companies, polymer companies, companies that create special materials for the automotive industry, which you might know about since you work in automotive. And I hear non-stop complaints from this founder about the way. So I think the best way is if Europeans somehow adopt the American way, and otherwise I don't and this is specifically about work culture and work rhythm, not necessarily mindset. I think mindset can be taught. Yeah, but in terms of taking time off and how you prize your weekends, 3-week vacations and not checking emails, I don't foresee that changing. Part of the reason why I live here and did not stay in Europe, it's just too slow. Yeah, I think innovation dies when things are too slow. Yes?
So I have a similar question. I'm actually I'm a European person. I'm originally from Ukraine, but now living in Spain, and I can get the thing you're talking about. It's about this when people are slowly and it's everything. So what are your suggestions? How do you think can we improve the situation, or how can we motivate people to work a little bit longer, or not to say bye bye when it's 18, for example,
6 p.m. Yeah.
That's it. We'll be back on Monday. Don't touch me, but that is urgent.
I think this is just what multinationals, this is why I think they have a very strong personnel department that deals with these sort of corporate. One of the most important courses I took during one of my master's degrees was, and I didn't prize it then, but I ended up crying in because of how then I realized how important intercultural communication was. I hadn't at all thought about intercultural communication was. And it is very important to not come with too strong of an American sensibility about what should be the case, and instead try to meet that moment with a little bit of collaborative, how can we find the best solution that works? So instead of enforcing in a very top-down sort of EU way, I mean, I'm not anti-EU, I'm very anti-EU regulation, but that's a whole other issue. I think we should try to meet that moment with a bit of grace, understanding that they're coming from a different point of view. Education has been granted in Europe to a large degree, or at a cost that is, that pales in comparison to what Americans have paid for it. And then I think in America, you're just so stressed because it's such a money-driven culture. At the end of the day, trying to make those blend is very difficult. I think in Europe, as long as you, as an American company, or if you're an American company entering Europe, or if you're a European company trying to enter America, one is going to have to speed up, one is going to have to learn to slow down. But ultimately, it stems from having real discussions on how to compromise. So it might not be optimal to ask someone to stay till 6, but it might be best to ask them how best you can meet their needs and what you expect from them. And then it's up to them then to take that as a challenge to get it done, I guess, before 6. They either work faster and get things done quickly, or they find a way to say it's not so bad to stay after 6 sometimes. Yeah. Sorry, I have no more to offer. It's no secret solution to that. Yes?
Could I get your thoughts on AI? You mentioned you have something.
My thoughts on?
AI.
Well, so one of the AI institutes that I'm advising now, which I met through my friend who's a leading philosophy and AI professor who focuses on manipulation of large language models. And so I was at his Black Tie Feast launching this over at Oxford in November, right before I was at the OpenAI Executive Summit. And these folks know Dario, right? Dario is a Princeton alumnus, as am I, and I've written him personally as well. And they also know, in my own building where I live, 2 of the first people who left with Mira to go found thinking machines are my neighbors, including also a special projects AGI, AGI specialist from Switzerland who is my neighbor. And then you also have folks over at companies like Anthropic and OpenAI. I have learned a few things in the last few weeks that is very shocking. The intention of these companies is not as beneficial as one might be led to believe, especially what I think they intend is to install dictators, good dictators. This is what I've been told in confidence, and I don't want anyone, so hopefully we're going by Chatham House rules. Whatever is said here doesn't get propagated. At the end of the day, and I don't want to be quoted as having said that, I just want you to know that at the end of the day, the end game for these companies is not necessarily to only help and aid you. It's to create someone who can actually ultimately guide you. And then you have to ask yourself to what degree you want to be guided and how much power you're willing to give up. That's one of the reasons why I advise an AI institute that focuses on applied category theory. It's very maths focused and looking at how to improve the large language model development. So it's in the conception phase of large language models and not so much. And these are all PhDs. I'm the only non-PhD. All PhDs from MIT and Oxford. And what they focus on is how to create societally beneficial models that look at epidemiological data, that look at safeguarded AI, dual use systems. So of course, AI use in drones and in military, but also in civilian systems. At the end of the day, I don't see AI being only harmful. I don't want to say that. I'm not a doom-focused person. Doomerist? Yeah. AI doomist, but I am someone who has reservations, and so that's why I always make sure to stay explainable, meaning that it is easily translatable for the layperson, beneficial, meaning that its goal is to actually help and uphold the best virtues of humanity, and then also responsible, meaning that there are, I'm almost done, sorry, that there are guardrails in place to ensure that the AI is not harming citizenry or sacrificing their safety and the safety of children, right? One little anecdote from OpenAI that I heard at this roundtable of AI leaders, including one guy who was offered the chief product officer role at OpenAI, and he's now founded his own company. He said, well, this was actually an anecdote from an AI team at YouTube, that a part of her performance improvement plan for this engineer was to improve the amount of screen time users were spending on certain types of videos. But she knew from the research that it would actually be harmful to their psyche, right? We know doom scrolling is something that people suffer from. They're just scrolling, you spend endless hours. I had a sinus headache yesterday. I was just laying in bed. I spent 5 hours just on the tube because I had nothing else to do and I had a sinus headache. But if I didn't have a sinus headache and I'm sitting there wasting my time, that's probably harmful because I'm harming myself by not being as active and doing things I need to do, right? So ultimately, she still put in whatever algorithm had to be put in to improve the outcome of them spending more time. So sacrificing human well-being for top-line growth is something that I think, and that's also what I want to say, my last word, having gone to the executive summit as the representative of the government and being the only non-sort of corporate SVP plus level, like I met folks from Novartis, from all the biggest companies you could imagine, from all across Europe, from Denmark, from Switzerland, from Italy, because they were pulled into Munich. Ultimately, the goal is to deploy these solutions into cybersec, into manufacturing, into robotics, into automotive, into pharma, and just make money. It's not necessarily to benefit humans ultimately is their top line goal, but what that looks like could be different than what we imagine. That's all I want to say. Okay, one last really quick one.
Why do you think Sam Altman was put into the CEO position at the first place when he didn't have too much successful cases back then?
I don't know. Well, so I actually helped coordinate, I should have mentioned this. So Sam's trip to Munich 2 years ago, exactly almost in May, I helped coordinate. I did not attend his talk at my alma mater because I was so embarrassed by the fact that we coordinated the visit with the minister-president of Bavaria, and then he wanted to invite other folks from Berlin. You don't go to Bavaria and then invite people from Berlin. It's a completely different universe. That's why I was a foreign representative for Bavaria in the consulate. Bavaria is Bavaria and Germany is Germany. Anyone who knows Europe knows this. That's why we have 40 offices of our own. I mean, we just closed ours due to what's happening transatlantically, but we could talk about that another time. I helped coordinate the visit of Sam Altman to Bavaria in May of 2023. It was full of folks who did not understand German political cosmos, and so requests were made that didn't make sense, and I had to really be firm. And I gave an alumni speech that day, and then I got off the campus because I didn't even want to be near it because I was so embarrassed that we had to renege on the offer of inviting the minister-president of Bavaria to an open table with Sam Altman. So that's all I want to say about Sam Altman. So my only interaction with him was probably not something that I didn't have a good impression. And if that's the way that people work, I think it's just Silicon Valley. People see you as it's really New York ultimately, even though the surface it's not. What I mean by that is West Coast culture is about working collaboratively, being symbiotic, how can we benefit from each other and profit from each other and work together. Ultimately, those at the top, like those sorts of folks, operate very New York transactionally. If you're valuable to them because you dig this, you know this person, you can benefit them in this way, and if you're not, then you just get cut. So I think maybe the work culture made it that way, but I don't know why he was installed and then thrown out. From what I've heard, it's only because of disagreements, and that's a governance issue. If they have a board that is acting responsibly and decides the best interest of the company is to go in a certain direction, but the founder or co-founder has a different vision, ultimately the board is supposed to have the say. But if the employees, which is the human capital that the company needs to even grow and thrive, decides otherwise, as we saw people walking out, then they reinstall him. I think your question was about why was he kicked out and then reinstalled, right?
Why he was put into the CEO position in the first place, and they want to OpenAI.
Why he was kicked out of the position and then put back in?
When OpenAI was founded,
Yes.
Why was he put into the CEO position at the very first place?
He's the co-founder. I mean, this is probably something that he probably had a hand in deciding. I don't know. I don't know the details about it, but ultimately, like I said, the board is there to provide governance. One of the things I mostly complained about, if you look at my Twitter, which I don't use, and this is it, this is all I'm saying. Tesla has been one of the most, and can lead to our Tesla guy. And I've given a speech at the CFA Institute, if any of you know the Chartered Financial Analyst Institute, CFA, so I've been invited to speak as a climate risk and return expert there 2 years in a row to New York. Tesla is what we just call, in this sort of ESG investment space, a quandary. It doesn't make sense that the company has been so successful. I mean, and this is speaking current administration, despite governance practices that are just like, how is the governance happening and and it can still be successful? It has a product that people really want, or wanted, or still want, as we will talk about going forward. But ultimately, governance is what matters, and that is the case of OpenAI. If the board has decided that this is the direction the company is going in, that this is the leader that they want, that the human capital and their output is too important. Human capital is ultimately what it's the labor of these folks. So if they were going to leave and were threatening to leave, and you have the best and the brightest that are threatening to leave your company, governance is going to dictate that you have to then reinstall the guy they want. And at the start, if he wanted to be CEO, and that's something that they probably collectively decided, ultimately what I mean to say is good board governance dictates creating value for shareholders. That doesn't always mean that they create value for society, ultimately. I think that's the big issue right now with OpenAI being structured as a nonprofit, and you have to really learn how to square that circle, as we say in English, and you can't square a circle now, can you? Yeah, anyway, that's all I have to say, folks. Nice to meet you all. I hope I delivered some value. Yeah.